So, woke up to a bit of breaking news this morning. Sebastian Vettel to leave Ferrari? So, Sebastian Vettel Sebastian Vettel to leave Ferrari at the end of 2020. Now, it may not be a huge surprise to a lot of people. It's not a massive surprise to me, although my feeling is that I did think he would continue. My feeling was that he would be desperate to see the next generation of Formula One cars come in. And now that's been pushed back to 2022, perhaps that's been one of the things that's tipped him over the edge with all of this. But I think there are more knock-on effects to this than might first meet the eye. The first thing to say is that it's a shame. It's a real shame that Sebastian, a driver of Sebastian's calibre, of his stature within the sport, wasn't able over the last few years to achieve what would have been an incredible dream for him and for many, many passionate Ferrari fans. I firmly believe that Sebastian Vettel would have made one of the greatest Ferrari champions. Having said that, of course, he has to take some responsibility for not being able to achieve that dream. It was his mistakes, together with the mistakes made by the team, that meant that although they came close on a couple of occasions, they never managed to quite topple the might of Mercedes. So there wasn't another seat on the grid that perhaps could have given him any shot at a world title other than a Mercedes. And I firmly believe that from Sebastian's point of view, if he were to win another world title, he would have wanted it to be in a Ferrari. That's why I think it's such a shame for him and for the sport and for the Tifosi, of course, that together they just simply weren't able to achieve it. So what happens next? Whilst there's nothing in the official statement from Seb or from Ferrari to suggest what his future plans might be, I guess you could read between the lines and look at some of his more recent body language or his more recent quotes and perhaps surmise that just maybe he is thinking about retiring. And if that were to be the case, that would be another huge shame. Not only for Ferrari and their fans, but for Formula One as a whole. He's one of the final drivers in our sport that has a real connection to the sport's history. The real connection to understanding what it means to be a Formula One driver and to be a Ferrari driver and to be a champion in this sport. What tradition he's upholding and what line of tradition he's following on from. I think that'll be a shame if we lose that, because the next generation of drivers perhaps don't have that same affiliation to what's gone before. He didn't get into the sport for fame or fortune. He's maybe one of the more quieter characters on the grid, but the things he does say often hold quite a lot of weight, partly because of his stature within the sport as a four-time world champion, but also because of his links and his understanding of the tradition of what a great sport this is. If the attraction of racing these brand new next generation Formula One cars is just too great to mean that he can't walk away from the sport, what could be his future options? Well, there's all sorts of discussion online I've seen this morning about people talking about him going to McLaren, perhaps in a swap with Carlos Sainz. Perhaps he could go to Renault in a swap with Daniel Ricciardo. Perhaps he could take on a role at the new to be named Aston Martin Racing and be part of a building process of a brand new team. Could he go to Red Bull and partner Max Verstappen? My own feeling on all of those things, could he even go to Mercedes in a swap with Lewis? My feeling on all of those things is probably not. And if I was really pushed to give an opinion at this point, based on nothing other than my own interpretation of what's been said and what's been felt, my feeling is that he probably will call a time on the sport. His statement does suggest that given that we've been in this period of lockdown over the last few months, it's given him time to reassess what his own priorities are. And you wouldn't blame him at all for focusing those priorities more towards his family, with his wife and children. One thing that is for sure is that if Vettel walks away from Formula One, it lights the blue touch paper underneath a silly season driver market that many people thought might just end up fizzling out into a series of one-year placeholder contract extensions. Right, let's start looking at who could potentially fill that seat at Ferrari for 2021 and beyond. I'll go straight in off the bat and tell you who my personal favourite would be, and that would be Daniel Ricciardo. Now, I know you're all saying, you can't put Daniel Ricciardo in, he would be a second #1 driver, you can't have two of those at Ferrari, that's just not what Ferrari do, it would cause fireworks at the team. Yep, I understand all of that, but let's not forget that Ferrari, like the rest of the world, is changing. We would have never said that Ferrari would have taken a guy in just his second year in Formula One and put him into that prime seat. But look how that worked out for them with Charles Leclerc. Daniel Ricciardo offers them experience, grit and determination. Obviously he's blisteringly fast, a fresh pair of eyes and set of experiences coming into that team that I feel like they desperately need. He can offer his experience when it comes to developing the car as well, that perhaps Charles Leclerc just can't do in the same way. And I think that if Ferrari really have aspirations at winning not just a Drivers' World title, but also a Constructors' World title too, they need the two very best drivers possible in that car. I can't think of anyone better than Daniel Ricciardo for that. Yes, they'll end up on the same bit of racetrack at various times because they're in the same equipment, and maybe that'll be at the very front of the field, and maybe they will come to blows at some stage. But you show me another driver on the grid who doesn't have aspirations at winning races and winning world championships if they were given that Ferrari seat. He's got the Italian connection, and I honestly feel he could inject a little bit of fun into that Ferrari team that they could really do with. I think he could work well with Charles Leclerc, let alone go up against him and destroy each other. I think they could be a good pairing. I'd love to know what you think. Another name that's been thrown into the mix a lot, certainly in the media, Carlos Sainz. Now, he would also be a really good fit at Ferrari, I think. He's a very fast driver. He's a driver that's really developed over the last couple of years at McLaren, but that's maybe my point. He's very settled at McLaren. He's got a certain level of status at McLaren. He's in a really good position. He's found himself really quite happy and comfortable. Now, I know there's always a huge temptation for a driver to get into that red suit and into that red car at Ferrari, but is it what he really wants if he's going up against a driver that Ferrari may well see as their outright #1 in Charles Leclerc? Does a driver really want to go to Ferrari in their prime, which you've got to say Carlos Sainz is, if he may not feel like he's got a fair shot at the outright world title and at winning races and at maximising his potential? That's something he almost certainly does have at McLaren right now, particularly with the Mercedes engines incoming from next year. Antonio Giovinazzi, obviously he's got the Italian link, he's got a Ferrari link already, but for me, just not consistently quick enough. He's not shown enough up against Kimi, who's a known quantity to Ferrari, and I know he has on occasion, but not consistently over a season. I don't think this particular opportunity has come at the right time for Giovinazzi. If he could prove himself over the next year and this had come a year later, well, maybe he could have been given a shot. Plus, you put two young kids in at Ferrari. First of all, that's very un-Ferrari-like, but secondly, it doesn't give them the balance of youthful exuberance combined with the experience that a team like Ferrari probably needs. What about somebody like Nico Hulkenberg? A lot of people have mentioned to me. Stepped out of the sport for this year, but already making sounds, making noises that he wants to get back in. Could Ferrari take him on a relatively short-term contract to steady the ship, to offer that experience and that development potential? Hulkenberg would surely jump at the chance. It was something that he nearly got quite a few years ago, earlier in his career, but it never quite materialised. And it could be that one thing that finally offers him the chance to get that elusive F1 podium. It's not really the way I would like to see a big Formula One team like Ferrari going. For me, it would feel like something of a step back. In my eyes, a team like Ferrari, if they've got aspirations to be the very best, need the two very best drivers that are available on the grid and deal with the internal politics after that. Yeah, Hulkenberg may not ruffle too many feathers, but is that the wrong way to go? Valtteri Bottas is another name that I've seen mentioned a lot. If he becomes out of contract at Mercedes, could he take up what would be a fairly similar role at Ferrari, playing that number 2 type role within the red team? Is it what he wants though? He's never really settled for a number 2 position at Mercedes. It's just the way it's happened. But if he went to Ferrari, well, surely it might be something that's much more formalised. Maybe it's even written into his contract. Does he want to go down that route? Is it an exciting move for Ferrari? Then you've got the likes of Mick Schumacher, who again, I don't think is ready yet. That opportunity hasn't come at the right time for him either. He needs a year at least in Formula One, perhaps in an Alfa Romeo, to cut his teeth, to assess him in Formula One machinery. And then the other name that keeps cropping up every now and then is Fernando Alonso. I just can't see that happening. But then I'll hold my hands up and say I never saw that happening at McLaren either, after the way he left first time around. But on top of that, if you assess what Fernando Alonso brings to the table, it's just not what Ferrari needs right now. We all know how good he is in a racing car, but they've pinned their flag, they've pinned their colours to Charles Leclerc. Fernando Alonso is not the kind of character that will settle for second best. He's also the kind of character that will wrestle power within that team towards himself, or at least have a really damn good go at it. And that will be something that will be destabilising, that will be unsettling. I really hope that Ferrari sees this opportunity with both hands to improve their team and their organisation. And for me, that means taking the very best driver, being aggressive about this and not just settling for what they've got. Daniel Ricciardo is that driver for me. Carlos Sainz, yes, would probably also work really well at the same time, but I think Daniel Ricciardo is the most exciting one. He's perhaps the one that would offer the team most excitement, give them the biggest boost. And for us as Formula One fans, who could want anything more than seeing Daniel Ricciardo in a Ferrari, finally with a shot at a world title? Anyway, of course, I'd love to know what you think. This is all speculation, of course, but sometimes it's really fun to speculate. Let me know who you think will end up getting that drive, why you think they should get it, and who, if anybody, I've missed off the list. I can't wait to read all your comments, but for now, I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.